Hi, my name is Jonathan Rotz, Field Agronomist for Pioneer, and today I'd like to take a quick look at soil fertility in alfalfa. Now, alfalfa is a perennial multi-cut crop, so we have to think about soil fertility over a long period of time, unlike our annual crops, which we get a chance every single year to think about. As always, with soil fertility, start with pH. We want to make sure that our pH is between 6.5 to 7 for alfalfa, and with that pH in that range, this makes all the other nutrients available to that crop. So as we move out of that range, critical nutrients may not be as readily available. Another thing with a perennial crop like alfalfa, we need to watch soil compaction. Obviously, in compacted areas, our soils will not be as easily explored by roots, and thus fertility will not be available to the plant. So remediate soil compaction before establishment and try to do your best to not compact those soils as that alfalfa is growing. With alfalfa being a multi-cut, multi-year crop, sometimes we lose track of the amount of fertility that's drawn off. Let's think for a moment on potassium. There's about 50 pounds per dry matter ton that alfalfa takes from potassium. Now let's think about that. If we take, let's just say an easy yield of 5 dry matter tons for a year for alfalfa, that would be 250 pounds of potassium that's pulled off. Now let's say that we do a 4-year rotation on our alfalfas. That's 1,000 pounds of potassium that's been removed. Phosphorus typically isn't as big of a deal. It's only 12 pounds per dry matter ton that's removed. And typically, at least in my area where we have a lot of manure usage, the phosphorus is okay. It comes with it. Potassium is one of the large drivers. Another thing that I think that we want to pay attention to in especially the Northeast where I'm at is sulfur. We used to get sulfur through atmospheric deposition. We no longer have that because we've cleaned the air up, which is a great thing. However, because of that, every dry matter ton takes about 5 pounds. Think about that over the life of a stand of alfalfa, that's almost 100 pounds of sulfur. Sulfur is also able to be leached through the soil. So we want to think about adding sulfur into our alfalfa rotations as well. Now, there's different ways to think about this. One is keeping those sulfur levels in our entire rotation. So using AMS or other, nitrogen products that have sulfur in our corn rotation, things like that. Gypsum would be another great amendment for alfalfa because it also brings calcium, which alfalfa is a fairly large user at almost 20 pounds per dry matter ton. Elemental sulfur is another great amendment to think about whenever you're dealing with alfalfa. One of the reasons for this is because elemental sulfur has to go through oxidation to be plant available. This means it's not in the sulfate form when we put it out there, and it also is not as easily leached. It's like a slow release fertilizer for sulfur, which is great in, again, a multi-cut perennial crop. We talk also a lot about boron when it comes to alfalfa, and boron's very important. Boron is a huge part of cell structure and protein synthesis within the plant. It also helps the plant be able to work with the mycorrhiza in the soil, which leads to extra exploration of our soil nutrition. Boron is not used hugely by alfalfa with only 0.05 pounds per dry matter ton that's pulled off. However, if we don't have that level there, it's critical. So we want to pay attention to our boron levels. It is recommended, however, that we don't go really high on boron either because it can lead to toxicity. So typically only about 1 pound per acre. So I recommend anytime we're thinking about any of our fertility products going between cuttings or whatever else, we think about, is it maybe a time to add some boron in there and put it out across? So when we think about alfalfa, the other question is, when do we fertilize? First off, get it right before we start. During our establishment year is the best time to get our pH right, make sure that all of our soil test levels are at optimum. If we know that we have a field that's going to be rotated to alfalfa, it's great to have that look ahead. And if we need some amendments, maybe even before the corn year, we start on that way so we can get those pHs and everything in line. The other thing to think about with alfalfa is with technology like Roundup Ready, and as Roundup Ready comes along with our Harv Extra technologies, this is extending our stand life. We can utilize those technologies to get much longer stands out, which means we have a lot more harvesting of dry matter and thus nutrition off of the soil. So we really want to pay attention to, in these situations, keeping that fertility up so that we don't run out of fertility and cost ourselves stand, yield, and even nutritional quality. The last thing I will mention is manure usage in alfalfa. Manure is a great asset to anyone that has it. However, we also want to realize that manure brings nitrogen along, and since alfalfa is a legume, it doesn't need that nitrogen. That means other species such as grasses or maybe some broadleaves will utilize that nitrogen and can sometimes really compete with alfalfa because we put that extra nitrogen on. Because of this, I like to recommend that guys keep the manure off of the new seedings and new stands and use it more towards your older stands where you're getting ready to rotate away. Obviously, that's perfect world scenario, but at least realize that whenever you utilize manure, you're going to actually bring other issues with, such as grasses and other weeds. If you have a Roundup Ready alfalfa out there, obviously this is a great way to control that as well. I hope you found this information helpful and insightful. I hope that you have a great rest of your season and get the most out of your Pioneer products. Thank you.